The alarm that went off at 0300 hours was not the normal kind. The normal kind was a soft yellow pulse that meant something minor, a pressure leak, a calibration error, maybe a cadet who had wandered into a restricted kitchen again. Station Orin 9 had 14,000 people living on it, and minor alarms were part of the background noise, like the hum of the ventilation system or the distant clang of cargo lifts. This alarm was red, full red, the kind that made the walls bleed color and the floor vibrate, and every single one of the station's 60-plus species wake up with their hearts doing something very fast and very unpleasant. The intercom crackled, a voice, clipped, controlled, and carrying the specific exhaustion of someone who had been doing this job for 30 years, cut through the noise. This is Admiral Seraph Denver. All personnel stand by. Specimen containment breach, East Wing, Level 7. Security teams to Corridor 7G, full response protocol. Move. In the security-ready room, 12 officers scrambled into gear. They pulled on reinforced suits. They checked their weapons twice. They ran a containment breach checklist that had 17 steps, because 17 steps was what the manual said you needed before approaching a Tier 9 specimen. Tier 9 was the top of the classification scale. Above it, there was nothing. The scale had been created by a committee of 200 xenobiologists who had, collectively, studied every dangerous creature in the known galaxy. They had argued for years about what deserved the top tier. They had eventually agreed that a Tier 9 was any creature for which no current tactical response was considered reliable. A Tier 9 did not mean dangerous. Dangerous was Tier 4. Tier 9 meant the manual essentially said, do not be near this thing. Station Orin 9 had one Tier 9 specimen in its restricted wing, an Urshery from Veldra 4. 8 feet tall, 6-limbed, with fur so dense it had stopped a low-caliber round in a field test without the creature noticing. 3 amber eyes. A chest that produced a low subsonic rumble that had, on 3 separate occasions, caused electronic equipment in the surrounding corridor to malfunction. The containment team reached Corridor 7G at 0311 hours. 11 minutes after the alarm. Fast by any standard. They stopped. The Urshery was sitting in the corridor. Just sitting. Its 6 legs were folded beneath its enormous body, the way a very large cat might settle in a patch of sunlight. Its bioluminescent patches, silver-blue strips running along its sides and between its shoulder blades, were glowing at a calm, steady pulse. Not the red of agitation. Not the white flare of threat display. Just quiet blue, slow and even. In front of it, cross-legged on the floor, was a human. He was young. 19, maybe 20. Brown hair that needed cutting. A cadet uniform with one sleeve slightly rolled up and a small grease stain on the left shoulder that had survived at least 3 washes. He was holding something out in his open palm, and the Urshery was eating it with the careful, deliberate patience of an animal that trusted the hand offering food. The security team stood at the end of the corridor and did not move. Their weapons were raised, but not fired, because firing them would require someone to give an order, and no one could quite process what they were looking at well enough to give an order. Admiral Den arrived 40 seconds later. She was a Kelvari, tall, gray-skinned, with 6 fingers on each hand and eyes that had seen a very great deal. She looked at the Urshery. She looked at the cadet. She looked at the containment team standing at the end of the corridor with their weapons up and their mouths open. She said, very quietly, "Stand down." Then she walked toward the human. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. He did not look afraid. He looked like someone who had been sitting comfortably on a corridor floor and had just noticed a superior officer approaching. He said, "Morning, ma'am. Sorry about the alarm." He got the secondary seal open. I think he figured out the pressure latch. He's actually pretty clever. Den looked at the creature. The creature looked back at her with 3 amber eyes. It produced a low rumble that made her back teeth buzz faintly. She said, "Cadet." "Yes, ma'am." "What is your name?" "Ryan Cole, ma'am." "First year." "Engineering track." "Cadet Cole." She paused. "Why are you feeding the Tier 9 specimen in Corridor 7G at 3 in the morning?" Ryan Cole considered this question with what appeared to be genuine thoughtfulness. He was lonely, he said. He gets restless when the station goes quiet. He doesn't like the dark much either. I noticed that a few months back. "A few months back," Den repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Since about 3 weeks after I arrived." Den was quiet for a moment. Behind her, The 12-member response team were having a collective experience that none of them had been trained for. They had prepared for a containment breach. They had prepared for an aggressive apex predator loose in a populated corridor. They had not prepared for an apex predator eating out of a cadet's hand while looking approximately as threatening as a very large family pet. How, Din said, did this start? Ryan told her. It had been his third week on the station. There had been a power disruption, a minor one, the kind that lasted 4 hours while engineering rerouted a damaged relay. Most cadets had stayed in their bunks. Ryan had gone for a walk because he did not sleep well in the dark, and walking helped. He had gotten lost. This was not unusual for him, he admitted. The station was large, and his internal sense of direction was, in his own words, not great. He had ended up in the restricted specimen wing. The security door had been on auxiliary power, which meant the lock had defaulted to a basic mechanical latch rather than the full biometric seal. He had pushed it open, not knowing what it was, because the corridor beyond had a faint emergency light, and he had been following light. He had walked the length of the wing. Most cells were empty. Research specimens came and went. At the far end, the large cell had not been empty. He had not known what an ershery was. He had not known what Tier 9 meant. He had seen a very large creature sitting alone in the dark in a cell, and he had sat down against the bars, and he had said, "Hey, you doing okay in there?" The ershery had stared at him with 3 amber eyes. Ryan had kept talking. He talked about the station, about his classes, about the fact that engineering mathematics were harder than he had expected, but he was getting there. He talked because silence in the dark made him uncomfortable, and because the creature, whatever it was clearly alive and clearly not happy, and talking to something unhappy was simply what Ryan Cole did. At some point he had found a protein ration bar in his jacket pocket, slightly squashed, mint flavor, which he did not like, but had taken from the canteen anyway, because wasting food felt wrong. He had slid it under the bars. The ershery had sniffed it. Then it had eaten it. Then it had moved closer to the bars, settled down, and made a low sound, not threatening, just present, like something that had decided another thing was acceptable company. When the power came back 4 hours later and a security officer found Ryan asleep against the bars with his head tilted sideways, the ershery was on the other side of the bars in the same position, the blue glow of its patches painting slow light across the floor between them. Din listened to all of this without expression. When Ryan finished, she said, "And you have been returning since?" "Every few nights, ma'am. He knows when I'm coming. He hears me in the corridor, I think. He's got good ears." Din looked at the ershery again. It had finished what Ryan had given it, and was now simply sitting, patches glowing their slow blue, 3 eyes calm. It was, objectively, the most dangerous creature on the station. It was, at this moment, the most peaceful thing in the corridor. She said, "And you named it?" "Grumble," Ryan said, "because of the sound he makes." Is that okay?" It was not in any manual. There was no protocol for it. There was no section in the Galactic Union Specimen Management Handbook titled What to Do when a cadet names your Tier 9 Apex Predator, and the Apex Predator accepts this. Din pinched the bridge of her nose. She said, "Cole." "Yes, ma'am." "Go to bed." "Yes, ma'am." Ryan stood up. He looked at Grumble. He said, quietly, "I'll come back tomorrow." Grumble made a low sound. Ryan nodded, the way a person nods when they feel they have been understood, and walked past the Admiral and the containment team and back toward the cadet quarters. The team watched him go. Then they looked at the ershery. The ershery looked back. Its patches pulsed once, slow and blue, and then it turned and walked back toward its cell with the particular unhurried dignity of something that had decided the night was over. Din stood in the corridor for a long moment. She was thinking about the manual. She was thinking about protocol. She was thinking about the fact that a first-year cadet with a grease stain on his uniform had been making friends with a Tier 9 specimen for 3 months, and she had not known, and the specimen had been, by every sensor reading available, calmer in the past 3 months than at any point in the previous 2 years. She turned to the response team. "File this under resolved," she said, "and someone get me Cadet Cole's full file." She walked back toward the command deck. Behind her, very faintly, the blue light of Grumble's patches still lingered at the end of the corridor, like something quietly waiting for morning. The file on Ryan Cole was 11 pages long and contained, by Admiral Din's count, 6 separate incident reports. None of them were serious. That was the strange part. They were the kind of incidents that got filed and forgotten. A cadet in a restricted area. A cadet who had borrowed tools from engineering without signing them out. A cadet found asleep in a cargo bay because he had been helping a maintenance crew fix a coolant line and simply hadn't left. Each report said, in its own way, this cadet does things he isn't supposed to do, but the results are never bad. The filing officer in Report 4 had actually written, in the notes section, no harm done. Cadet Cole appears to have genuinely believed he was helping. He was, technically, correct. Din set the file down. She looked at the senior staff sitting around the table in the briefing room. Commander Was from Security, a broad-shouldered Delvari male with a scar across his jaw. Lieutenant Preetha from Xenobiology, small and precise. Her 4 translator nodes blinking at her collar. Station Medic Oren, who had not been told why he was here and was beginning to look nervous. And Doss, the quartermaster, who looked like a person who had already accepted that his day was going to be strange. The situation, Den said, is this. Cadet Cole has, over a period of approximately 3 months, formed an unsanctioned but apparently stable relationship with the Urshery specimen in Restricted Wing 7. The specimen has shown no aggression toward him at any point. Sensor logs confirm this. It has, in fact, shown measurably lower stress indicators during and after his visits than at any other recorded period in its 2 years of containment. Silence. Commander Was said, "We're contain the specimen and restrict Cole's access to the wing." The specimen opened a pressure latch containment seal without tools, Den said. If it wants to leave the cell, it will leave the cell. The question is what happens after it leaves. More silence. Preetha pulled up a data screen. An Urshery that perceives its bonded individual to be threatened will enter a full aggression state. Response time from calm to full aggression is approximately 0.8 seconds. At that point, the recommended response from the manual is, she paused, reading, emergency beacon to the nearest fleet and full station lockdown. She set the screen down. There is no intermediate step. Euthanize the specimen, Was said. The room went quiet in a different way. Den said, that option is on the table. What she did not say, what she had already decided, looking at the sensor logs from last night, looking at 3 amber eyes calm as still water and blue light glowing soft in a corridor that should have been a disaster zone, was that she was not going to take that option. Not because she was sentimental. She was not a sentimental person. But because the data was clear, the Urshery was not the problem. The Urshery was, against every expectation and precedent, manageable. The only question was the method. Preetha cleared her throat. There is a third option. There is no precedent for it, but the Galactic Union Specimen Management Code does contain a clause, Section 14, subsection C, for reclassification of a specimen where a stable handler bond has been established and verified over a minimum observation period. She pulled up the clause. The observation period has already been exceeded, technically by 3 months. Den looked at her. You're recommending we make Cole the official handler. I'm recommending the station stop pretending that it isn't already what's happening, Preetha said carefully. The bond exists. Pretending otherwise doesn't undo it. It just means we have no official structure around it. Den thought about this for exactly 12 seconds. Then she said, write the reclassification request. I'll sign it. Was looked like he wanted to argue. He looked at the sensor logs again. The image of 12 fully armed security officers standing in a corridor while a Tier 9 Apex Predator calmly ate from a cadet's hand, and he did not argue. Oren, the medic, finally asked why he was there. Preetha told him he was there because bonded pair biology was a medical matter and they needed baseline readings on both subjects going forward. Oren said both subjects in a faint voice and wrote something on his notepad that was probably transfer request. The paperwork took 4 days. In those 4 days, Ryan Cole was quietly called into Den's office and told 3 things. That his access to Restricted Wing 7 was being formalized, that he was being assigned new quarters, and that he was not, under any circumstances, to discuss the arrangement with other cadets until it was official. He had listened to all 3 things and then asked, very carefully, is he going to be okay? Den had said, that depends significantly on you, cadet. Ryan had nodded. He looked, for just a moment, less like a cadet who had been in 6 incident reports and more like someone who understood the weight of what he was being given. Then the moment passed, and he said, "Can I see him today? He doesn't like it when I miss more than 2 nights in a row. He gets loud. He gets loud," Den repeated. "The electronics thing. The rumble. It knocked out the corridor lights last Thursday. That might have been me missing visits, I think. I'm not sure, but I think." Den had stared at him. Then she had said, "Go." He went. The new quarters were on the ground floor of Habitation Block 3. They were large by cadet standards, a wide main room, a reinforced floor, door frames built to handle weight and size because the station's original architects had, when designing for multi-species habitation, accounted for the possibility of large residents. The reinforcement was meant for Delvari officers, who were broad and heavy. It would serve a different purpose now. Ryan stood in the middle of the room and looked at it. Pryn, his bunkmate, stood in the doorway and did not come in. Pryn was Thalori, insectoid, for arms, antennae that moved constantly and independently the way fingers drum on a table. He was Ryan's assigned bunkmate and had been since the start of the year. He was also, by his own admission in a message to his family back home, living with a human who makes very poor decisions that somehow work out, and I cannot decide if this is good luck or a fundamental property of the species. He looked at the room. He looked at Ryan. He said, "You're going to bring it here." Ryan said. "And yeah, is that weird?" Pryn's antennae moved in a pattern that, for a Thalori, expressed something between disbelief and resignation. He had learned, in 7 months of bunking with Ryan Cole, that asking "is that weird" was not a question Ryan processed the way other people did. "I'm going to start keeping a log," Pryn said. "Of what?" "Of things you do that should not be possible." Ryan smiled. Entry 1. Entry 1, Pryn said, is the entire situation. He paused. "I will need several sub-entries." The official paperwork came through on a Friday. The Urshari specimen, now listed in the station registry under the identifier URS-7 Veldra, with a secondary name field that said, in plain letters, Grumble, was reclassified from containment subject to station resident, non-personnel. It was the first time in the Galactic Union's history that a Tier 9 specimen had received that classification. Ryan had the station ID printed. It was a small card, the same format as every other station ID, with the name field reading Grumble and the department field reading Unassigned, and a photo that was, technically, an image taken from a containment camera. 3 amber eyes looking slightly to the left, blue patches glowing steady, the overall impression of something very large and very calm. Ryan framed it. He put it on the wall of the new quarters, next to his own ID card. Pryn saw this and updated his log to Entry 1, Sub-Entry 3. The human framed the apex predator's station identification card. He appears to find this charming. I have no framework for this. Grumble moved into the new quarters the same night the paperwork cleared. He walked down the corridor with Ryan beside him and simply went in and settled on the floor in the far corner, which was the largest open space in the room. His patches glowed. The ambient electronics in the room buzzed very softly, the way they always did near him, a low warm hum that Ryan had long since stopped noticing. Ryan sat on the floor next to him for a while, the way he always did. Grumble made his low sound, the kind that meant nothing was wrong. Down the corridor, in the adjacent quarters, 3 cadets had filed noise complaints about a persistent electrical hum. Den reviewed the complaints. She noted the source. She filed them under Resolved and made a note to have the corridor's electrical shielding upgraded. Then she pulled up the long-range sensor grid, a habit she had at the end of every day, a routine check she had done for 30 years. The scan showed a faint distortion at the edge of the system. Small. Faint. The kind of reading that could be instrument noise or a passing object or 100 different unremarkable things. She flagged it as anomalous and forwarded it to the Night Watch science team. Then she went asleep. The distortion, for its part, did not stop. It started, the way most things with Ryan Cole started, with a completely ordinary question that somehow led somewhere no one had thought to go before. He was in the Xenobiology archive at 2,100 hours on a Tuesday, which was not required for any of his engineering coursework, and which he was doing entirely of his own choice. Pryn had found him there after dinner and asked what he was doing, and Ryan had said research, and Pryn had said, for which class? And Ryan had said, not for a class. and Prynin had sat down because he had learned that when Ryan Cole did things not for a class, those things tended to become events that required log entries. The archive was large and quiet. The station's xenobiology library held records on roughly 4,000 documented species, including their biology, behavioral patterns, and environmental needs. Ryan had found the HFY file months ago and had read the whole thing twice. He was reading it a third time now, but a specific section, the biology subfile, specifically the section on their annual cycles. HFY from Veldra 4 had a biological year that was measured not by a calendar, but by their bodies. Every cycle, roughly 410 standard days, their bioluminescent patches went through a full reset. The patches would dim completely, then slowly return to full brightness over a 2-week period. This reset was tied to hormonal cycles deep in the HFY physiology. It was, according to the file, a species-wide event. Every HFY alive did it on their own individual schedule, tied to their date of birth. Ryan looked at the file. He looked at the date of Grumble's arrival on the station. He cross-referenced it with the behavioral log that Preetha's xenobiology team had kept during the first months of containment, specifically the entry that noted a full patch dim event approximately 2 months after arrival, which had alarmed the team until the biology file explained it. He did the math. Then he did it again because he wanted to be sure. He looked up at Prynin. He said, "Grumble's birthday is in 4 days." Prynin's antennae paused in a way that usually meant he was deciding how to respond to something. Then he said, "The HFY do not have birthdays. They have a biological cycle reset tied to their birth," Ryan said. "That's the same thing." "That is not the same thing." "It's close enough." Ryan had already opened a new document on the terminal. "I want to throw him a party." Prynin was quiet for long enough that a passing archivist glanced at them. Then he said, very carefully, "You want to throw a birthday party for the Tier 9 Apex Predator on a space station. He's not Tier 9 anymore. He's station resident, non-personnel." That reclassification was administrative. The clause did not change. Ryan was already writing a list. "I need food. A lot of it. The high-protein blocks he likes. The ones from the green crate, not the blue crate. And lights. He likes the blue and silver ones. Have you noticed that? When the corridor lighting shifts toward that range, his patches respond. He gets brighter. I want to get decorative lights in those colors. And I want to do it in Corridor 7G because that's his space. He knows it. It'll feel right to him. And I want Cole. A banner. A proper one. It should say Happy Birthday Grumble. And I think some of the other cadets should come because he should meet more people. I've been thinking about that. Cole." Ryan stopped. He looked at Prynin. Prynin's 4 arms were folded in the way that meant he was being serious. He said, "You want to invite cadets to a birthday party for the creature that caused a full emergency response 4 months ago." He was calm the whole time. The security team was not calm. That was a them problem. Prynin made a sound that his translator rendered as a sigh. It was not quite right. Thalori didn't sigh, but the meaning was close enough. He looked at the list Ryan had made. He looked at the date. He said, "Who would we even invite? Nobody will come." "Some people will come," Ryan said. "People are curious. They're scared, but they're curious. And if they meet him properly, with food and lights and no alarms going off, they'll understand. He's not what they think he is." Prynin's antennae moved. He was thinking. Ryan recognized this and waited, which was a skill he had developed specifically for Prynin, who processed things in a way that needed space. Then Prynin said, "I will help you. But I want it noted, in whatever record exists of this moment, that I am doing so not because I think it is a good idea, but because it is statistically safer to participate in Cole's plans than to refuse them, and then watch them proceed without any form of sensible oversight." Ryan grinned. Log entry. Already writing it. The requisition form went to Doss, the quartermaster, the next morning. Doss was a veteran of 34 years on various stations and ships. He had seen a great many things. He read Ryan's supply list. 50 kilograms of high-protein ration blocks, 2 rolls of decorative lighting in blue and silver, 1 printed fabric banner with custom text, a request for use of Corridor 7G on Friday evening, and he sat with it for a moment. He looked up at Ryan, who was standing on the other side of the counter looking straightforwardly hopeful. Doss had approved stranger requests. He had once approved a request from a Delvari lieutenant for 400 kilograms of sand to be brought on board because the lieutenant's biology required sand to sleep in. He had approved a request for a tree. An actual tree. It was in Habitation Block 2, and everyone watered it. He stamped the form. Pick up the lights from Storage Bay 9. The ration blocks will be in the corridor by Thursday. Don't make a mess. Ryan said, Thank you, Doss. Doss said, I don't want to know what this is for. Ryan said, Okay. He didn't know what it was for. Everyone in the quartermaster's office knew. Information on Station Orin 9 moved the way information moves in any place where 14,000 people live close together, fast, informal, and with extra detail added at each stop. By Thursday, approximately 300 people knew that the human cadet was throwing the Veldra Forerschery a birthday party. 11 cadets agreed to come. This was more than PRYNN had expected and fewer than Ryan had hoped for. But Ryan said 11 was great and meant it. PRYNN wrote entry 9 in his log. 11 cadets have agreed to attend. I have briefed them on basic Urschery behavioral indicators. I have told them that blue patches mean calm, red means agitation, and white means they should leave the corridor immediately and not look back. They have all nodded. I do not think they fully understand. Cole believes that meeting Grumble in a positive context will change how they see him. He is probably right. This is the most unsettling thing about Ryan Cole. He is usually right. Friday arrived. Ryan and PRYNN spent 3 hours in Corridor 7G. The blue and silver lights went up along both walls, strung between the utility conduits, casting the whole space in a color that was not quite like anything the station's standard lighting produced, softer, more layered, the blue deep and the silver like light on water. It looked, Ryan thought, a little like the bioluminescent patches on Grumble's sides when he was very calm. The ration blocks were stacked in the center of the corridor. Ryan had arranged them in a vaguely pyramidal shape because it seemed festive. It was not a cake. It did not look like a cake. It was 50 kilograms of high-protein cubes arranged in an upward tapering rectangle. He put a small light on top anyway. The banner went up slightly crooked because the left side hook was a centimeter too high. Ryan looked at it. He decided it was fine. The 11 cadets arrived at 1900 hours. They stood at the entrance of the corridor and looked at the lights and the ration block pyramid and the banner, and several of them looked at each other in the way people look at each other when they are not sure they have made a good decision but have already committed to being here. Ryan had told Grumble, the night before, that something was happening the next evening. He had explained it the way he always explained things to Grumble, talking steadily, clearly, the way he'd talked from the beginning, in a cell in the dark 3 months after arriving on the station. He didn't know how much Grumble understood of specific words. He thought, from everything he'd observed, that Grumble understood tone and rhythm very well, and probably more content than anyone gave him credit for. Grumble had listened. His patches had done something slow and attentive. Ryan had taken this as understanding. Now Ryan walked down the corridor to the new quarters and knocked on the open door frame, which he did out of habit even though Grumble had no door and no concept of knocking. Grumble raised his head from the floor. 3 amber eyes, slow and warm. Ryan said, Come on. Something good. Grumble stood. He was very large in the corridor. His back nearly brushed the ceiling, and he walked with the particular weight of something that knew exactly how much space it took up and moved anyway with a kind of unhurried confidence. His patches were their usual traveling blue, shifting slightly with each step. He entered Corridor 7G. He stopped. The lights were doing what Ryan had hoped, reflecting off the wall panels, layering silver and blue in a way that made the whole space look different, alive in a way that corridors on space stations usually were not. The ration blocks caught the light at their edges. The banner read Happy Birthday Grumble in large letters that Doss's print shop had rendered in a clean, plain font, because Ryan had asked for something easy to read and the print shop had taken this seriously. Grumble did not move for a long moment. His patches changed. Not red, not white. They shifted from the usual quiet blue to something brighter, more saturated. A pulse that moved slowly across his sides like a wave, blue deepening towards something that the xenobiology files listed, in a footnote that few people had ever read, as contentment display. A Veldra Forerschery in contentment display produced a specific pattern, slow, rolling, moving from shoulder to flank in a cycle that in their natural environment was associated with safety, with home, with being in a place where nothing was wrong. It had never been recorded in captivity. Not once, in the 2 years Grumble had been on the station, had the sensor logs showed a contentment display. The 11 cadets at the entrance of the corridor had gone very still. Not from fear, the patches were not red, and PRYNN had told them what colors meant, but from something else, something quieter. Grumble walked to the ration block pyramid. He ate it, not quickly, with the methodical appreciation of an animal that had learned to find genuine pleasure in the specific food Ryan brought. Block by block, steadily, his patches pulsed their slow contentment wave the entire time. Then he sat, and he rumbled. The rumble was low. It was always low. It was the kind of sound that did not so much enter the ears as it settled into the chest, into the sternum, into the small bones behind the jaw. 3 cadet comm badges buzzed with static. 1 cadet's translator earpiece went briefly to white noise and back. The decorative lights along the wall flickered once, softly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ryan sat down beside Grumble, not leaning on him, just beside him, the way a person sits beside someone they have sat beside many times. His shoulder was approximately level with Grumble's knee. The blue light from the patches painted Ryan's face and the wall behind him. Ryan looked at the cadets. He said, quietly, because the moment felt like it called for quiet. He says thanks. Probably. I think. One of the cadets, a young Kelvari female, let out a breath. It was not quite a laugh and not quite a sound of relief. It was something between the two, the sound a person makes when something they were afraid of turns out to be something else entirely. They stayed for 2 hours. The cadets, gradually, came further into the corridor. Some sat on the floor. One Delvari cadet, who was nearly as large as Grumble was wide, sat close enough that Grumble could have reached him easily, and Grumble did not reach him. He just sat. He rumbled, on and off, and the lights buzzed and the cadets' badges clicked with static, and after a while even that felt normal, felt like part of the room. PRYNN stood to the side and watched, and added 3 sub-entries to his log, the last of which read, "Cadets are relaxed. The Urshery has not moved aggressively at any point. The decorative lights are actually quite nice. I did not tell Cole this. I will not tell Cole this. It was a good evening." In the station's command center, 3 decks up, the Night Watch science officer who had been monitoring the anomalous distortion at the edge of the system flagged a new reading. The distortion had grown. It had moved. The pattern of movement was not consistent with any natural phenomenon in the database. She sent a priority message to Admiral Den and then sat with her hands very still in her lap for a moment, looking at the data, because she had seen this pattern before. Not in her career. In her graduate studies. In a file that her professor had assigned as a case study in ancient galactic history with a note in the margins that said, "Pray you never see this in real time." She sent a second message marked urgent. Then she sent a third, marked emergency. Den was asleep when the messages arrived. She woke up. She read them. She sat on the edge of her bunk in the dark for a moment, and the expression on her face was one that she would not have let anyone see. Then she got up. She put on her uniform. She reached for the direct line that she had, when she first established it, called the emergency contact for Cole's quarters. Ryan had named it the "Oh No" phone. She had thought this was undignified at the time. She picked it up. She understood now why he had named it that. There is a particular kind of quiet that falls over a room when the information being presented is bad enough that the brain takes a moment longer than usual to process it. Not silence. People were still breathing, still shifting in chairs, still making the small sounds of living beings in a room together. But the quality of the air changed. It thickened. Every person sitting at the briefing table at 0430 hours that morning experienced it in their own way. Commander Was went very still. Lieutenant Preetha made a small sound, and then stopped making any sound at all. The Night Watch science officer who had sent the emergency messages sat with her hands flat on the table, as if the table needed anchoring. Admiral Den stood at the front of the room and let them have the moment. She had already had her moment, alone in her quarters in the dark before she put on her uniform. She had been doing this job long enough to know that you had to take the moment and then put it away, because the people in the room needed you to have already processed it. Then she said, "Questions." Was said, "How certain is the identification?" The science officer, her name was Reen, and she was young for her rank, which meant she was exactly as young as she looked, and had earned the position anyway, said, "The pattern matches the recorded signature of a Vorkai extinction wave at 97.3%. The remaining 2.7% is the error range of our sensors at this distance. I have run it 6 times. What's the last recorded Vorkai event?" Preethas said. 4,200 years ago. Sector 9 of the Outer Arm. 3 systems. Green paused. They were not habitable afterward. More of that thick quiet. Den said, "Timeline. At current trajectory and the speeds that the historical record attributes to a wave, we have approximately 96 hours before the forward edge reaches this system. For days." Nearest Galactic Union Fleet response. Wasp looked at his screen. His jaw was tight. 6 days. Minimum. That assumes an immediate emergency dispatch. Maximum burn, no stops. The math was not complicated. It did not need a calculator. Every person in the room had done it the second they heard 96 hours and 6 days in the same minute. Den said, "Evacuation. Standard full evacuation of Station Orin 9 takes between 18 and 24 hours at full personnel cooperation," Wasp said. "All civilian and non-essential personnel off station on transport vessels. Essential crew to skeleton staff withdrawal in the final window." "Start it," Den said. "Now? I want non-essential evacuation beginning within the hour." Wasp nodded and left the room. Preethas stayed. She said, carefully, "Admiral, the Urshery." Den said, "I know. The transport vessels are not rated for." "I know, Preetha. The only vessel on the station with the structural capacity to transport a full-grown Urshery is the heavy cargo hauler. At capacity, the cargo hauler serves as the evacuation vessel for the essential crew. It cannot do both." The room was very quiet. Den said, "I know. I will handle it." She did not look forward to it. Ryan was in his quarters when the Oh No phone rang. He was asleep, because it was 0430, and Ryan Cole, despite everything, slept deeply. Grumble was in the corner. His patches were dim with rest, cycling slow in the dark the way they did when he was in the deepest part of his sleep. The phone rang twice before Ryan got it. Den told him. She told him clinically, without softening it, because that was the only way to give someone information this large. All of it, straight, and then let them process. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long?" "For days." "And the fleet?" 6. Another silence. She could hear him breathing. She could hear, faintly, the low subsonic hum that Grumble produced even while sleeping, the sound that had buzzed the corridor electronics all night, every night, since the new quarters were assigned. Ryan said, "Okay, I'll be up in 10 minutes. Den said, "Cole, there is also the matter of." "Grumble, I know." His voice was steady. Not brittle steady, the way voices got when someone was holding something back. Just steady, the way someone sounded when they had already found the footing. "I'll be up in 10 minutes, ma'am." He came up in 8. Den told him the rest in her office with the door closed. The transport capacity. The cargo hauler. The math that put Grumble on one side of the equation and the essential crew on the other. She watched his face while she said it. His face did something complicated. It moved through several things very fast, something that might have been fear, something that was definitely a kind of grief, and then something else. Something that settled. He said, "I'll stay." Den said, "That is not. He stays because the hauler can't carry him and the crew both. I stay because I'm not leaving him. So the hauler takes the crew, and I stay." He said it without drama, without the voice of someone performing a heroic choice. He said it the way you say something you have already decided. "I'm a cadet. I'm not essential crew. The station can run on skeleton staff without me." Den said, "The survival probability of remaining on this station during a Vorkai wave event is." "I know what it is, ma'am." He looked at her directly. "I know." She had been an admiral for 11 years. She had told people things they did not want to hear many times. She had not often sat across from someone 19 years old who looked at an extinction-level probability the way Ryan Cole was looking at it. Not like he did not understand it, but like he had decided that understanding it did not change the answer. She said, "I cannot order you to stay. I can only order you to leave." He said, "I know, ma'am." She did not order him to leave. Pryn found out about Ryan's decision the way he found out about most things Ryan did. Too late to prevent it, and just in time to respond. He came to the quarters while Ryan was reviewing the station schematics. which was something he was doing with a focused intensity that Pryn had not seen from him before. Grumble was awake, sitting in the corner, watching Ryan with 3 amber eyes. Pryn stood in the doorway. He looked at the schematic. He looked at Ryan. He said, "I'm staying too." Ryan looked up. "No, you're not. I've already told Commander Was. I am not listed as essential crew, but I have filed a voluntary retention form, which is a thing that exists because someone at the Galactic Union anticipated that certain individuals would make choices like this." He paused. "There is paperwork for most things. It is one of the better features of the Union." Ryan said, "Pryn, the odds are." "I have calculated the odds," Pryn said. "I do not intend to discuss them. What I intend to do is assist you, because whatever you are planning." He looked at the schematic, at the notes Ryan had already started scribbling on a paper pad beside the terminal, at the half-empty cup of something that was probably cold by now. "You are planning something. And your plans have a history of working. I do not understand why this is, but I have observed it 6 times, and I have decided to treat it as a data point." Ryan looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you." Pryn sat down. He picked up a spare paper pad and a writing tool. He said, "Start from the beginning." 5 more people stayed. A Delvari engineer named Brack, who was large and practical, and said that someone needed to make sure the power grid stayed functional. An older Kelvari technician named Sala, who said she had been waiting 30 years to see a Vorkai wave up close, and was not about to leave now. 3 cadets from engineering track who filed their voluntary retention forms and did not give a reason, and whose forms were approved because Was, reviewing them, thought about a first-year cadet sitting against the bars of a containment cell in the dark and stamped the forms and did not ask. Ryan thanked each of them when they arrived. Not with ceremony, just directly, the way he did everything. That night, when the evacuation transports were filing out and the station was going quiet, 14,000 people down to 9, the corridors emptier than they had ever been, the sound of the ventilation system suddenly much louder without all the noise of life to cover it. Ryan went to the observation deck. It was the big one on the station's underside. Reinforced glass, the full curve of space visible in every direction. Nobody went there much. It had no particular function, just the view, and people on space stations tended to stop seeing space as something worth looking at after a while. Grumble had gone there first. Ryan had followed, curious. The Urshari stood at the glass. He was looking outward, toward the edge of the system, in the direction the sensors said the wave was coming from. There was nothing to see. It was too far. But he was looking anyway, 3 amber eyes fixed on a specific point of darkness. Ryan stood beside him. He said, "You know something's coming." Grumble's patches pulsed once. Not contentment. Not agitation. The amber light was different, slower, deeper, something the files had no category for. An old light. Like something that had been burning for a very long time and was still burning. Ryan put his hand against Grumble's side, feeling the warmth of him through the fur, the slow vibration of the rumble that was always there, quiet and present. He said, "I need to tell you what I'm thinking, because it involves you, and I want you to be part of it. Not because I need you to be, but because you should know." Grumble turned his head slightly. 3 amber eyes. Ryan started to talk. He had 3 days, a station schematic, an engineering track education, and whatever that quality was in him that made things work when they should not. He talked through all of it. The frequencies, the electronics, the amplifiers, the cargo hauler, the pattern of the wave, the weakness he thought he had found in a 97-page historical analysis file that Reen had quietly put in his access folder that afternoon with no message attached. He talked until he was sure Grumble had heard all of it. Grumble listened. His patches glowed amber and slow. Outside the glass, the stars were steady and bright. In one direction, too far to see, something ancient and vast was moving toward them. Ryan looked at it anyway. He was going to need every hour of the next 4 days. On the morning of the 4th day, the Vorkai wave entered the system. There was no dramatic announcement. There was no sound. Space does not carry sound, and the wave did not announce itself. It was simply not there, and then it was a mass of darkness against the stars that should not have been there, spreading across the sensor grid like ink dropped into water, moving with the absolute certainty of something that had been doing this for longer than most civilizations had existed. Reen, in the sensor room, watched it appear. She had studied the historical record. She had read the accounts from 4,200 years ago, second-hand, third-hand, reconstructed from fragments, because the people who had seen it firsthand had not, for the most part, survived to write clearly. She had thought she was prepared. She was not prepared. She opened the comm to Ryan. She said, "It's here." Ryan said, "How long to forward edge contact?" "At current speed, 47 minutes to effective range." "That's enough." He paused. "Is the array live?" "All speakers active. Frequency cycling ready on your signal." "Good. Tell Brack I need maximum power to the outer speaker grid. I need everything he can give me." Reen related. In the engineering bay, Brack made a sound that in Delvari translated roughly as "understood" and began rerouting power. He did not ask why the outer speaker grid needed maximum power at a moment like this. He had spent 3 days watching Ryan Cole work, and he had stopped asking why 3 days ago. Let us step back. Let us look at what Ryan had been doing for 4 days. Sleep had happened in 2-hour fragments. Food had happened when PRYNN brought it and put it near Ryan's hand. At one point Salah, the senior technician, had simply stood in the doorway of the command center and watched Ryan work for an hour before going away and coming back with 3 engineers' pads worth of calculations that confirmed what Ryan had been figuring out by instinct and cross-referencing with the historical data. The plan had 3 parts. Ryan did not call them phases or stages because he had not been thinking in tactical language. He had been thinking the way he always thought, practically, about what was actually in front of him, about what he actually had, and about what he knew that no manual had told him. The first part was sound. Urshari produced subsonic resonance. This was documented. What was less prominently documented, buried in a footnote in a pre-Union xenobiological survey of Veldra 4, which Ryan had found at 0300 on day 2, bleary-eyed and running on a protein bar and stubbornness, was that the resonance frequency of a full-grown Urshari in sustained vocalization was 7 to 9 Hz. This was the same range as the electromagnetic coordination signal used by Vorkai units to maintain formation. The historical record from 4,200 years ago mentioned, in passing, in a single sentence that most historians had apparently read as a footnote, that Vorkai units showed formation disruption in the presence of large tectonic events. Veldra 4, Reen had confirmed when Ryan had asked her to check, was a high seismic planet, full of low-frequency geological rumble. Ryan had read that footnote at 0318 hours and had sat very still for about a minute. Then he had looked at Grumble, who was watching him from the corner. He had said, slowly, "You are from a planet that is loud, in the exact frequency that hurts them." Grumble had rumbled. Ryan had started drawing diagrams. The station's outer speaker array was meant for emergency broadcasts, all-frequency transmission, powerful enough to reach vessels in the system. Ryan and PRYNN had spent day 2 building an amplifier rig that connected to Grumble's specific resonance frequency. It was not elegant engineering. Salah had looked at it and winced 3 times. But she had confirmed it would work. The second part was noise. Humans, as Ryan explained it to PRYNN on day 3 while running frequency calculations, had evolved in an environment where being loud was useful, where making noise drove things away, disoriented things, filled space in a way that changed behavior. There was no tactical doctrine in the Galactic Union that said use noise as a weapon against a Vorkai wave. There was also no tactical doctrine that said don't, because no one had survived long enough to write one. Ryan programmed every transmitter on the station to cycle through a broad-spectrum noise burst, not random, but specifically designed to layer over and against the formation frequencies that the historical record described. Not silence-breaking noise, coordination-breaking noise. The third part was the cargo hauler. It had not left with the evacuees. Ryan had remote piloted it to a position behind the gas giant, the far side, out of the wave's direct approach path. This had taken 6 hours and the help of Brack, who had never remote piloted a heavy cargo hauler and had needed Ryan to walk him through the secondary controls twice. The hauler was carrying the station's emergency pulse weapon, single use. A capacitor system that discharged everything the station's backup power could give into a focused, directed energy burst. It was a last resort defense. It had never been used in the station's 20-year operational history. The manual said to use it if the station was directly boarded. Ryan had decided that the wave counting as a boarding situation was a reasonable interpretation. 47 minutes. Ryan went to the amplifier rig. It was in the outer corridor near the speaker array access point, a crude construction of repurposed components that looked nothing like any approved engineering project and everything like something built by someone who had not slept properly in 4 days and did not care what it looked like as long as it functioned. Grumble was already there. This was the part Ryan had not engineered. He had explained the plan to Grumble over 3 nights of talking, sitting on the floor, the way he always talked to him. He had no idea how much Grumble understood of electromagnetic frequencies and formation disruption and amplifier rigs. He suspected the specific technical content did not matter. He had explained what he needed. He had told Grumble that it would be loud, and that the sound would come from him, and that he was asking. Not commanding, asking. Grumble had looked at him with 3 amber eyes. He was already at the rig when Ryan arrived. Ryan stood in front of him. He looked up, always up, with Grumble, and said, "This might not work. I want you to know I've thought about it carefully, and I think it will. But I can't promise." He paused. "I'll be right here the whole time. Right here, okay?" Grumble made a sound. Low, steady, present. Ryan turned to the console. "Reen, Brack, all stations. On my mark, start the noise burst, and give me full power to the array." "Ready," Reen said. "Ready," Brack said. PRYNN. PRYNN's voice from the command center. "Ready." And Cole, for the record. Entry 31. "This is the most terrifying and remarkable thing I have witnessed in my life." Ryan almost smiled. "For the record, Mark." Grumble began to rumble. It was not the casual low rumble of his resting state, the kind that buzzed badges and softly glitched the corridor lights. This was full vocalization, something that Grumble clearly had not done in the station's confines before, because the confines had always made it unnecessary. He opened his chest to it the way a large animal opens its chest to a call that is meant to carry across a whole landscape, and the sound that came out was below hearing and above it at the same time, a pressure that moved through the floor and the walls and the hull and outward through the amplifier array in a directed wave that was, by Sol's calculations, approximately 200 times the natural output. The lights in the corridor flickered. Ryan braced his feet. On the sensor grid, in the command center, PRYNN watched the forward edge of the Vorkai wave hit the resonance output. The formation broke. It did not explode. It did not collapse and fire. It frayed. The leading units lost their perfect spacing. The coordination pattern, that precise, relentless grid that had consumed 3 systems 4,200 years ago without ever losing a unit, stuttered. Gaps appeared. Units drifted. The wave, for the first time in recorded history, was not behaving like a single coordinated thing. "It's working," PRYNN said. His voice was very steady. He was clicking so fast that the translator gave up and rendered it as static. "Cole, it is working." Ryan triggered the noise burst. Every transmitter on the station screamed on cycling frequencies, layering into the gaps the resonance had made, filling the coordination channels with interference that the disrupted units could not filter. The wave lurched. Its advance slowed. "Brack," Ryan said. "The hauler." Brack brought the cargo hauler out from behind the gas giant on maximum burn. Remote piloted, no crew, moving at a speed that the autopilot system had flagged 3 separate warnings about, and that Brack had overridden 3 separate times. It came through the disrupted forward formation like something moving through fog, not unharmed. The hull was already registering impacts from confused individual units, but through. It reached the discharge position. Ryan said, "Fire." The emergency pulse discharged. It lit the sensor grid white for half a second. When the feed came back, the forward formation of the Vorkai wave was gone. Not damaged, not retreating, gone, dispersed at the unit level, unable to recombine because the disruption and the interference were still running and the pulse had destroyed the primary coordination nodes that the historical file had suggested existed in the leading edge. The rest of the wave stopped. Ryan heard the silence, or what passed for silence, under Grumble's sustained rumble, under the noise burst, under the hum of every system running at maximum. In that silence, the wave did not advance. It held. For the first time, something had made it hold. He said, "Reduce resonance output. Step down the burst." Slowly. Grumble's rumble eased. Not stopping, just stepping back. The patches on his sides, which had gone to a color Ryan did not have a name for, not red, not the threat white, but a deep, burning amber like the inside of something very hot, began to cycle down. Slow pulses, returning toward blue. Ryan sat down on the floor. Not a controlled sit, more of a slow descent, back against the wall, legs going out. His hands were shaking slightly. He noticed this with a distant kind of interest. Grumble lowered himself too. Enormous, warm, heavy. His side came to rest about a foot from Ryan. His patches pulsed their returning blue. Ryan said, "Good. That was really good." The wave held its position for 51 hours. The Galactic Union fleet arrived on hour 49. They had pushed beyond maximum burn after receiving Ryan's emergency message, which had been transmitted on day 1 and which had described the plan in enough technical detail that the fleet's tactical officer had read it 3 times and then forwarded it to his admiral with the note. "I do not know if this will work, but I cannot find a reason it shouldn't." The fleet found a disrupted, stationary wave and a station that was still functional, with 9 living occupants and 1 Urshery. The fleet finished what the resonance and the pulse and the noise had started. The wave, without its forward coordination structure, could not reform. The fleet engaged it in sections. Each section, without the collective signal, was manageable. It took 9 hours, but it was done. In the sensor room, Reen watched the last formation dissolve and sat with her hands very still on her console for a long time. She was thinking about the footnote. The single sentence in a 4,200-year-old historical record about tectonic rumble. The sentence that every historian had read and not followed. She was thinking about a first-year engineering cadet who had read it at 0318 hours and had sat very still for a minute and then started drawing diagrams. She wrote a note to herself that said, "When someone tells you what a thing cannot do, check the footnotes." She saved it. She would use it later. She would use it for the rest of her career. Admiral Den docked at Station Orin 911 hours after the last Vorkai unit was confirmed destroyed. She had been on the lead fleet vessel, watching the final engagement from the tactical room, watching a stationary and fractured wave get dismantled piece by a fleet that had arrived 2 days early on burns that would require engine overhauls on 6 ships. She had watched it with her hands behind her back and her expression completely neutral, the way she watched everything, and nobody in that room had known that she had spent most of the previous 4 days not sleeping. She docked. She walked through the station's main corridor. It was quiet. 9 people and 1 Urshery in a structure built for 14,000, and the absence of all those living beings had a weight to it, a particular hollow feeling that space stations got when they were emptied out. Her footsteps echoed. The ventilation system sounded very loud. She found Ryan Cole in the command center. He was asleep in a chair. Not a comfortable chair. The command center's chairs were designed for alertness, with no give and no recline, but he had found a way to sleep in one anyway, which was a very human thing to do. His head was tilted to the side. There was a smear of something on his right hand that was probably from the amplifier rig. The schematic he had been working from was still open on the console beside him, covered in handwritten notes in the margins. Grumble was on the floor. There was not quite enough room for him. He had to fold his 6 legs at an angle, and his shoulder was against the base of the console, and his head rested near Ryan's chair in the way that a very large animal rests its head near a person when it has decided that proximity is the point. His patches were dimmed to their deep sleep cycle. Slow gold. Not a color in any file. Den stood in the doorway. She stood there for longer than she had intended to. Long enough that the fleet's tactical officer, who had followed her in, stopped a respectful distance behind her and waited. She did not wake them. She turned and walked out, and she told the tactical officer that the debrief could wait 2 hours, and the tactical officer, who had read Ryan's emergency message 3 times on the way there and had his own feelings about what he had found on arrival, agreed without a word. Word spread. This was inevitable. Station Orin 9 was not a secret location, and the Vorkai wave had not been a secret event. Long-range sensors across a dozen systems had tracked it from the moment it appeared, and the Galactic Union had been monitoring the situation with the specific tense attention of an organization watching something it had no good response to. The fleet had been dispatched the same day Ryan's message arrived, not because the Admiralty thought the plan would work, but because they were out of other options and the message had been specific enough and serious enough that ignoring it felt worse than trying. When the wave stopped, when the sensor feeds across those dozen systems all showed the same thing, a Vorkai formation going stationary and fractured, the data went everywhere at once. It always did. The galaxy was large, but communication traveled fast, and unusual data traveled faster than usual data because there were always people watching for it. By the time Din woke Ryan for the debrief, the image had already gone out. It was not a dramatic image. No one had been taking pictures of a battle. The image was from the station's interior security feed, Corridor 7G, the evening of the birthday party, taken from a camera in the upper corner of the corridor. Blue and silver lights along the walls. A banner, slightly crooked, reading Happy Birthday Grumble. A pyramid of protein ration blocks, half-eaten, with a small light at the top. 11 cadets sitting on the floor. And in the center of it, Grumble, enormous, patches glowing that deep and rolling contentment pattern. And beside him, sitting with his back against Grumble's side with the ease of someone who had been sitting there many times, Ryan Cole. Someone on the fleet, no one ever officially confirmed who, had pulled the clip from the security feed and sent it out with a caption that read, "The galaxy prepared for an extinction event." The human cadet was throwing the beast a birthday party. By the time Din sat down with Ryan for the debrief, 40 million beings across 11 species had seen it. Ryan did not know this yet. He came into the debrief room looking like he had slept 2 hours in a chair, which was accurate. He had combed his hair, which was not quite enough. He sat across from Din, and the fleet's tactical officer sat beside Din, and PRYNN was there at Ryan's request, log pad in hand, antennae moving steadily. Din said, "How did you know it would work?" Ryan thought about it. Not the performative thinking of someone deciding what to say, the actual thinking of someone giving a question its proper weight. He said, "I didn't know. I thought it would work because the data supported it, and because the thing that everyone else had missed was in the historical record if you read the footnotes. But I didn't know." He paused. "What I knew was that I wasn't leaving Grumble. So the plan had to work. And the plan was the best I could build with what I had. So," he shrugged slightly, "I built it." The tactical officer, his name was Farron, and he was old enough that very little surprised him anymore, looked at Ryan Cole for a moment, and then wrote something in his notes that he would not share in the official debrief, but would repeat to his crew later. He didn't know it would work. He just decided it had to. I think that's the whole story. Din picked up Ryan's file. She opened it to the last page. She wrote something. She closed it. She said, "You are being recommended for commendation. A formal review of your actions will be submitted to the Galactic Union Command for consideration of the Strategic Ingenuity Citation, which, for your information, has been awarded 11 times in the Union's history." Ryan said, "Okay. You are also being recommended for psychological evaluation." "Okay. And for a promotion, field promotion, pending formal review, from cadet first year to cadet senior grade, with a notation that the review is expected to accelerate your standing by 2 full years." Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What about Grumble?" Din looked at him. "His station ID," Ryan said. "I want to make sure it's still valid. And I want his quarters kept. I want it on record that wherever I'm posted, he comes with me. I know that's not standard. I know it requires special classification. I'm asking anyway." Din said, "Cadet Cole." "Yes, ma'am. His station ID is valid. His quarters are his. And I have already begun the paperwork for a standing handler pair classification that will follow both of you through any posting." She paused. "It is not standard. I am making it standard. Starting now." Ryan let out a breath. Just one breath. Quiet. The kind that comes out when something you were carrying gets set down. He said, "Thank you, ma'am." Outside the debrief room, 3 decks down, Grumble was in Corridor 7G. The birthday lights were still up. They had survived the 4 days of the crisis. Nobody had taken them down. Partly because there were only 9 people on the station and taking down decorative lights had not been anyone's priority, and partly, perhaps, because there was something about them that felt necessary to leave up. A silver and blue light in a station that was waiting to find out if it would still exist. The banner was slightly singed at the left corner. The cable for the lights on the right wall had come loose at one point during the power rerouting and been reattached by Brack, who had done it without comment because Brack did everything without comment. Grumble sat in the corridor the way he often sat there, in the center of the space, patches glowing their ordinary traveling blue. He was not doing anything in particular. He did not need to be doing anything in particular. This was his corridor, in the way that places become yours when you have been shaped by them, when they hold something of who you are. He looked at the banner. His patches shifted, a slow, brief pulse of that deep rolling gold, there, and then fading back to blue. Pryn came around the corner with his log pad. He stopped when he saw Grumble. He stood for a moment, for arms loose at his sides, and Tinny making the slow, deliberate movement that meant he was experiencing something he would need time to properly file. He sat down cross-legged on the floor, a respectful distance away. He opened his log. Entry 48, he wrote. The station is intact. The crew is fine. The wave is gone. Cole is in debrief. I am sitting on the floor of Corridor 7G with an Urshery, and the birthday lights are still on, and I think this may be the most significant thing I have ever witnessed. He paused. The Urshery looked at him with 3 amber eyes. Not a threat look, just the direct, calm attention of something that was deciding what it thought of you. Pryn kept writing. Not because he had to, because some things deserve to be written down properly, and this was one of them. He wrote, I have filed 48 entries in this log about Ryan Cole. I have described things that should not be possible. I have documented outcomes that my models did not predict. And I have come to a conclusion, which is this. The galaxy categorized humans as a minor new member species. A curiosity. Biologically unimpressive, technologically mid-tier, socially chaotic. We had charts and assessments and proper documentation. We had not considered one thing. We had not considered that a human would sit down in the dark in a containment cell with the most dangerous creature on the station and offer it a slightly squashed protein bar and stay. We had not considered what that does, what it makes possible, what it can hold off at the edge of a system when everything else has run. The birthday party was for Grumble, but what it became was something else. It became the reason 9 people had a reason to stay, and a reason to try, and a plan to build. It became the moment that corridor looked like something worth protecting. The galaxy prepared for an extinction event. The human cadet was throwing the beast a birthday party. Those 2 things are not opposites. I understand that now. Those 2 things are the same thing. He closed the log. Down the corridor, the blue and silver lights glowed on, warm and steady, in the quiet of a station that was still there. The banner held its crooked angle, Happy Birthday Grumble in plain letters, slightly singed at the edge, meaning exactly what it had always meant, which was not a tactical decision or a calculated move or a strategic maneuver. It was just something someone did because someone else mattered to them. It turned out that was enough. It turned out it was more than enough. It turned out it was, in the end, the whole point.